The Jabaliya refugee camp is the largest of Gaza Strip's 8 refugee camps, according to the UN. More than 100,000 people live there. It is located north of Gaza City and is the nearest camp to the Erez border crossing, which before the war linked Gaza to Israel. The Ministry of the Interior in Gaza reported that 20 homes were completely destroyed in the Israeli bombing that targeted a residential neighborhood in the Jabaliya camp. The director of Gaza's Indonesian hospital, a nearby medical institution, told CNN that hundreds of dead and injured people arrived at the hospital. He also said that many more are still under the rubble. The Israel Defense Forces is taking ownership for the attack. An Israeli military spokesperson told CNN that an Israel Defense Forces attack caused the massive blast at the Jabaliya refugee camp as they were targeting a very senior Hamas commander in the area. Later, the IDF claimed that fighter jets acting on intelligence killed Ibrahim Biari, who was the commander of Hamas's Central Jabaliya battalion and one of the leaders responsible for the October 7 terrorist attacks in Israel, adding that numerous militants were also hit in the strike. There's been widespread condemnation of the attack from countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Jordan, and Egypt, as well as the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In an interview with CNN, Marwan Jilan, Director General of the Palestine Red Crescent Society, called the attack a war crime and a total disregard for Palestinian civilian lives. There was also condemnation here in Israel. Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem denounced Israel's campaign in Gaza, saying the scale of killing on the enclave is horrifying. Rafael Romo, CNN, Tel Aviv, Israel.
I would exercise a lot of caution relying on reports coming out of Gaza. I remember how the event in the Al Ahli hospital in Gaza City started with reports of 500 dead and then 800 dead, and I know how it ended. We were blamed for killing many Palestinian civilians then, but it later became apparent what had happened, and it also became apparent that the number of civilian casualties was greatly inflated by all of the so-called authorities in Gaza, which is basically saying Hamas. Now, I'm not saying that there are no civilian casualties. What I am saying is that we struck an important military objective. This Ibrahim Biari, who was a battalion commander who was leading operations and fighting against Israel as he was targeted, he and many dozens of enemy combatants were in a tunnel complex underneath the ground. We struck that tunnel complex and that caused it to collapse. And it is our assessment that dozens of Hamas operatives were killed. Those are casualties that should be factored in any report of casualties coming out of the Gaza Strip. And I also understand that there is significant structural damage around, and that is because Hamas built that vast tunnel complex underneath the buildings, and it probably collapsed as a result of the strike. We have to put into context that this is the same area, northern Gaza, that we have been asking Palestinian civilians, non-combatants, to evacuate for almost 2 weeks. Most Palestinians have. But I really ask and would want to understand, why have Palestinian civilians either been forced or chosen to remain in that area in direct risk of their own lives? They should move to the south. They should not be in a war zone, in a main combat area. And it's not too late to call on all Palestinian civilians in northern Gaza, please evacuate to a safer area in the south, because northern Gaza is an active combat zone and Hamas uses civilians as their human shields. Today's event is a clear example of it.